Blog Talk Radio.
Police should be on their way in a few minutes.
I don't know what the hell it was, but it was big. It looked like a great big dog.
Is it a bear, maybe?
Maybe, I don't know.
Sir? Hello?
A giant, hairy creature, part ape, part man. Seen many times in the rugged mountains and deep woods of the Pacific Northwest. The encounters have not always been peaceful.
In our modern world of concrete and steel, we're far removed from the Indian lore of Bigfoot. It's hard to imagine any corner of our crowded world where a giant, man-like creature could roam free. Yet there's persuasive evidence that Bigfoot is real. If we assume that Bigfoot is real and that men are closing in on this seemingly gentle monster, then we must prepare for that first meeting. To have eluded us for so long, Bigfoot must understand men very well. The burden will be on us to understand him. Bigfoot may well be waiting for some sign that we're ready.
All right, welcome to Talk Bigfoot episode 10. This is our first live show, and I'm here with James Hendrix and Jeff Stewart. How are you fellas doing?
Oh, we're doing pretty good. Appreciate the opportunity to come on this evening and share some of my experiences and a little bit of my investigations and some projects that we're up to.
Oh, sure. I'm glad to have you. Have you had any
doing good.
Any new stuff happen since the last time I talked to you?
In our case, we've had I have actually a couple other investigators that work with me, and we've been following up on some cases. We've sort of stacked up a backlog of cases here in our area. We work primarily the southeast Texas area, and we've had a real influx of reports recently. It actually caused us to develop a bit of a backlog, mostly road crossing sightings, those sorts of things. I think Jeff has been working on quite a bit of other stuff also that he probably wants to fill you in on.
Yeah. What's going on with you, Jeff?
Oh, gosh, man. I went last night and enjoyed the premiere the East Texas premiere, I guess you would say. They did premiere this movie, I think, at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, but they did it again here in Jefferson, Texas. The movie Something in the Woods, great little movie. Enjoyed it thoroughly. I can't wait for it to come out on DVD so everybody can get a copy and see it. Probably the best special effects Bigfoot latex costume, old school costume that I've ever seen in a movie. Cool. It was excellent. No computer graphics or anything. They went old school with it and made a really good movie. And the movie is family friendly. There was not one curse word in the whole movie. There was no nudity. There was no sexual content. I mean, it was just a good old suspenseful thriller of a movie with I probably wouldn't take a 5-year-old to see it because it'd be a little scary for them, but 8, 9, 10-year-old kids probably would eat it up to our adults, Really? Other than that, I went last week filmed a new show that I've got coming up. It's a new project that I'm working on with some people and trying to kick off a new show. We did a little bit of a pilot for a new show, and hopefully it's going to kick off and going to get picked up.
Well, can you tell me any more about that? Like, what's it going to be? Trying to think of what I can say without letting too much of the cat out of the bag, so to speak. It's going to be a show that's going to encompass everything. We're not just going to go after Bigfoot. We're going to go after everything that is a mystery. Anything and everything that is got a big, huge question mark. That has a big, huge question mark by it. Chupacabra, Bigfoot, UFOs, the paranormal, as far as ghosts and hauntings, and go to some of the asylums and different places like that, and institute a different technique that you really haven't seen on any of these shows before. Some common sense techniques, some logical techniques, that every noise you hear is not a Bigfoot. Every stick that snaps is not something paranormal, or something Bigfoot related or creature related. Debunking 99.99% of what we find. Therefore, we can get to that minute percentage that is real. And that's the minute percentage that we want. We don't want the trickery, the fakery, and all of the, I heard a howl. Well, that had to be Bigfoot. And everybody that's at home listening is going, that was a coyote, or that was a wolf, or that was a cow bellowing in a pasture. So we're trying to approach it with what people want. And it's just like I told them when they approached me. I said, you got to give them the weenie. When you go order a hot dog, you get a bun and some mustard, and you don't get any weenie, you're not going to eat that you're not going to go and order that hot dog again from that restaurant. It's the same thing with a Bigfoot show or a paranormal show or anything. These people are only going to watch so many episodes, and there's no weenie, there's no meat in the bun. So you've got to go after things like this week. If say we go after Bigfoot this week, well, the odds of actually going out while you're filming an episode for a show, and actually finding any kind of a Bigfoot or any really significant evidence is between slim and none. And that's just the cold, hard facts. But there are things out there that go bump in the night that you can go after, like Texas blue dogs and other cryptid animals
that you do have a very, very high chance of coming away with something tangible. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to go after some of the hard-to-find things, but we're also going to go after some of the unique things that are capable of being filmed and being touched and being caught, being looked at.
That's very cool.
Yeah, that's always the conundrum in something like this. Your odds of actually finding something, if you've taken out a large crew of people into the woods, are almost non-existent. So it's tough to do something like that when the majority of experiences that people have are usually random or the result of many hours of just being out in the woods, of chasing leads, of going up into areas where you wouldn't expect people to normally be in. And that's tough because it's hard to reconcile that with producing something to go into any sort of media, because media is an instant gratification sort of thing where you've got 30 minutes or an hour that you're going to try to fill with hunting for something that you're very unlikely to find while you're dragging a camera crew around. So I could see how that's a very tough proposition.
Yeah, for sure.
It is.
Are you going to be coming out of Texas, or is it only in Texas?
It looks like I'm actually going to have to be going out of Texas. Going to have to be traveling, and we're hoping all over the world. So we're gonna go after the orang pindak. We're gonna go after the Yaren and go after some of the more remote locations and see what we can come up with our techniques, with my expertise on animals and wildlife in general, and what I institute here in the United States, in Texas, and take that to other places. Now, of course, that's going to require, that I not only become an expert in, my native wildlife and flora and fauna. I'm going to have to really break down and study whatever country we're going to, whatever location we're going to, and it's going to be part of the fun of it. I'm going to have to learn the animal calls, the sounds of everything in those woods, and the terrain and the vegetation and what's edible and not edible, and, that's going to be part of the fun of it.
That sounds like it's going to be pretty amazing. Definitely sounds like it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I hope it is, and I hope, we get picked up. I hope that it's what we're doing is what the networks are wanting, from the feedback that we've been getting. The old era of all of these shows that basically are portraying themselves as a truthful and real documentary type show, but they're really not, is going out. That whole thing is on the outs, because people are so smart now with the internet and with everything. It's so easy to Google something and find out that it's a hoax. It's so easy to look something up, and with the technology, even at your fingertips on your cell phone, you're going, I've got an app that can make that same ghost appearance, or, I've seen that. That's a mangy coyote, So there's so much that you're going to have to go to that nth degree. Put your hands on that animal, get DNA from it, send it, get it tested at 2, maybe 3 reputable laboratories, and get that result and give it to the audience and say, here's what we found. We're not lying to you. We're not trying to pull any wool over your eyes. We thought we had something, but it turned out to be a mangy coyote, or it turned out to be this, that, or the other. And I think the audience will respect you a lot more. Your fans and everybody else will respect you a lot more because you're truthful, and you're going, okay, I gave it my best shot. I did everything right, and this is what we came up with.
Right.
I completely agree that that's got to definitely be the natural evolution of where the Bigfoot community goes. It really cannot sustain itself in the long run without taking a far more scientific approach. Because anybody can go out and hear noises in the woods, most all of which are either going to be identifiable, or even if they're unidentifiable, by their nature, you can't say that was a Bigfoot if it's unidentified.
Right.
So there has to be a solid groundwork laid out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This last week, I was out with a crew. These guys, none of these guys were from the South down here. They were from a little further up north, most all of them. And we're sitting there, and they're like, man, we got a recording of sound that we've never heard before. We've never encountered it before. We want you to listen to it. And I listened to it. And I laughed, and they said, what is it? I said, it's a rain crow. And they're like, a rain crow? We've never heard of a rain crow. And I said, they're also called a yellow-billed cuckoo. But we call them rain crows here in the South. And they have several distinct noises they make. And they're like, wow, we would have never known that. And so the thing is, these guys weren't trying to pull a hoax on me or to do anything like that. They honestly did not know what that sound was, because where they're from, they don't have them.
Oh, it's tough, even here locally in southeast Texas. I've been a hunter all my life, been in the woods, lived in a rural area my entire life. And sometimes when you hear something out there in the woods and it's a little bit different sounding than a typical example of that animal, it is really tough, and it's always a learning process.
That's true.
I'm nearly 50 years old, and I'm still learning stuff every time I go out in the woods.
I always think it's hilarious.
Oh, yeah, nature is a constant teacher.
I always think it's hilarious when someone hears a screech owl for the first time. Cracks me up, their face.
Oh, yeah. That's one of those definite ones that you wonder what in the world kind of monster is that.
Well,
sounds like somebody getting murdered.
People also don't realize that animals have so many different vocalizations they make. Like a white-tailed deer, for instance. White-tailed deer has over 120 different vocalizations that they make. And people don't realize that. And, foxes have many different vocalizations that they make. They don't just make one or two. They make several different. And all the different animals in the woods make many different sounds. And we don't realize they make those sounds because 9 times out of 10, we're never in the woods when they make those sounds.
Right.
And so it's been one of my quests. I sit and I pour over thousands of hours of audio yearly and listening to animal sounds, red fox, gray fox, coyotes, red.
Did we lose him?
I think he may have cut out on you.
Yeah, I think so. I know he does.
Go ahead.
I think we lost you there for a minute, Jeff.
Yeah, I think you may still.
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of 3,000 acres behind 4 locked gates. There's nobody in here but me. So it's like, who's making the sounds?
Yeah.
Another thing you have to be careful about along those same
Still
lines.
There?
Yep. We're here. You keep cutting out on us a little bit.
One of the things along those same lines that you have to be real careful about, when we do investigations, we don't announce that we're going to be going out and doing an investigation, because there are definitely people out there who will attempt to hoax you. So you have to be very careful about what you do out there. Never announce things ahead of time. And most people legitimately believe they've seen something. The average person you talk to is absolutely not trying to hoax you. They've just either seen something that they can't identify that's a known natural animal, or in some cases they've actually seen something that would be classified as a Bigfoot, or hairy man, or Sasquatch, or any variant of the name that you want to use for it. And it only takes one of those sorts of encounters to be real in order for the phenomenon to be real.
Right.
Even if you eliminate 999,000 sightings, and yet one is real, then it only takes that one. And I have firmly developed the belief that there are enough legitimate witnesses out there to provide a very strong circumstantial case for the fact that Bigfoot, or hairy man, or whatever you want to call him, there is some reality to that particular phenomenon. Now, I can't necessarily define to you exactly what that phenomenon is. I can't tell you what its exact nature is, but I can tell you I absolutely believe that the phenomenon itself is real. I believe people are actually seeing something. I didn't always take that position. I was very strong.
That's what I was just about to ask.
Yeah,
I was about to ask you if you believed before you had your...
No, not at all. I have made fun of several people in the past about the idea of Bigfoot. But what happened was, it was about 12 years ago, my wife and I were together and had a very close-range sighting, close enough that I was able to eliminate the idea that I was looking at a person. And from there on out, I started studying the phenomenon, and I started running into other people that I couldn't dismiss. And I eventually got to the point where I started doing my own interviews. My wife and I got together a group of people that are investigators, and we investigate Bigfoot and some paranormal phenomenon, anything basically unexplained, to try to put something to this, because it becomes a mystery that will just drive you crazy once you've had a sighting that you can't easily dismiss.
Yeah. You back with us, Jeff?
Yes, I am. My phone, the lovely thing, dropped the call, so forgive me.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just asking
I live
James
way out here in the sticks.
Yeah, it happens. I was just asking James if he believed in Bigfoot before he had his encounter. What about you? Did you?
I really didn't think about it before my first encounter. My first encounter was when I was 15 years old. So, at that point in time, as a child, I remember going to the drive-in theater, and I remember seeing The Legend of Boggy Creek, and I remember seeing The Creature from Black Lake, but I didn't really give it much more thought than, it kind of scared me, Went home and, made sure the screens were on the windows and my bedroom window was shut tight and locked, kind of thing. And then 2 weeks later, I didn't give it a second thought, because I didn't even really, we done went and saw another couple of movies at the drive-in, and, now Dracula or the Wolfman was on my mind, not Bigfoot. So at the time I went and had my encounter, I didn't even, Bigfoot was not even a thought to me. And even when I saw the creature for the first time, I still didn't say that's Bigfoot. I still thought that, first I thought somebody was playing a joke on me. And then after I realized that, it wasn't someone playing a joke on me, well, I grew up on the river and everything, and you heard tales of, old hermits that lived way off in the river bottoms and everything, that didn't want to have any contact with the outside world. And you heard about, hey, don't go over in that area because old man so-and-so lives there and he'll shoot you. And, and honestly, I got to thinking, well, maybe that's some old hermit that lived down here in the river bottom, But then as you sit and you think about it, and you're going, okay, if it was an old hermit, why was he naked all except for long hair all over his body? if it was a hermit, why had he been wallowing in the mud and had mud caked all over his long hair? You know, and you're sitting there and you're going, if it's a hermit, why did he look basically in the face like an Australian Aboriginal? You know, you're sitting there asking yourself all of these questions. You know, you've never seen another human being in the woods that met that description in your life. And, you know, I'd been in those woods since I was a toddler with my dad, you know. So, I mean, I was not, even at 15 years old, I was an experienced outdoorsman. I mean, I could hunt, fish, trap, track, everything with the best of them at 15 years old. So, you know, I can't, before I saw my creature the first time, you know, I can't say I did believe or didn't believe. It just was not an issue. I didn't think about it either way.
I had came from a little bit different sort of background on that. My father has a degree in biology, and he was a science teacher his working career, and we had been involved in a lot of wildlife projects together. And so I had taken a very scientific approach to the stories that I was hearing out of people, because there were always a few stories around even here. And I thought to myself, well, this must be misidentification, or someone is just telling a story, or maybe they're just downright delusional. And those kind of things are easy to dismiss until you see something that you can't dismiss yourself because you've personally seen it. And in my own case, I tried for several months to convince myself I had seen an orangutan running across a road in the middle of Polk County, Texas, you know. You know, an orangutan that didn't quite match what an orangutan looks like, but an orangutan was as close in my mind as I could match it up. And I tried that for a long time, and that's when I began sitting down, looking at other people's stories. One of the aspects of the sighting that I had is it was quadrupedal. Well, I had never heard of a Bigfoot running on all fours. And so that's one reason I went straight to orangutan as an explanation. Well, as I got to reading other people's encounters, time and time again, I ran across people who had witnessed something that was running on all fours. Now, the one I witnessed also ran bipedally, so that eliminates the idea of a bear or something like that. As a matter of fact, it jumped a 4-strand barbed wire fence running on 2 legs, which a bear is not really capable of doing.
How fast was it moving?
Well, what I did, I should probably back up a little bit and explain the whole encounter. My wife and I were coming home from shopping, going down a small farm-to-market road, and it was getting near dusk. It would have still been legal deer hunting time. You know, it was still bright enough for that. I had maybe getting near the point I was going to cut my headlights on, but still pretty daylight. And something was running across hay pasture on 2 legs and jumped a fence. Well, I thought instant assumption is it was a person. And he came down into the ditch, and I realized that he was going to come right straight out in front of me, and I was going to hit him. Well, I slammed on my brakes. And as I slammed on my brakes, and as he was coming up the ditch from having jumped the fence, he turned his torso instead of his head to look at me while he was running. And when he turned back forward, he dropped down on all fours, ran across the road on all fours. When he got to the other side, he stood back up on 2 legs, kind of went into a squatting position and crossed his arms and turned his torso again and looked at my wife and I. And by that point, we'd basically come to a halt. And later on, I went back out there and took some measurements, and we looked at him from about 21 feet away. And I had my wife write down a number that she felt was the number of seconds that it took it to cross the road. I wrote a number down. Then I took and compared those 2 numbers. They were pretty close. I made the measurements and calculated his speed, and when he was on all fours, he was probably running about 30 miles an hour. So you're looking at something that's moving extremely fast.
And the second encounter that I had was when it took off running it cleared a 60-yard patch of open wood in just a matter of seconds. You know, I've played a lot of sports, you know, a lot of football, played with a lot of very fast running backs and people like that, and not one of them could have cleared a 60-yard opening in, you know, go 60 yards in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
I believe
sure.
What I saw could have probably on a short burst caught a white-tailed deer. It was going that fast. I don't know how it would be over, you know, an extended period of time. Yeah, one of the other things that really stood out to me about my sighting is what I saw was only about 5 feet tall. And in my head, I had this image of a thing that was, you know, 8 feet tall or whatever. And so I thought, no, it couldn't be a Bigfoot. It was only 5 foot tall. Well, the thought at the time never occurred to me that, yeah, if this is a real biological animal, then you have juveniles. And also, there's the potential that you have some members of the species that are smaller than others. One phenomenon you see in the northern hemisphere is the further north you go, the larger creatures get because of the cold climates. Well, the further south you go in the northern hemisphere, typically the smaller examples of creatures get. That's why bears in the south are smaller than bears in Alaska, say. And it stands to reason, if you're talking about a real animal here, that examples of it across the south might, on the average, be smaller. And the investigations that I've done and the people I've interviewed, the average height has probably been around 6 feet, 6.5 feet. And I've had some reports of people who describe something that's 8 feet tall, but typically what I'm seeing reports of anyway is definitely inside the range of normal human height. Of course, that can be used as an argument against the sightings, but at the same time, if I'm imagining and making up a story about a Bigfoot, I would make him big, you know.
Right. Yep. That's been your experience too, hasn't it, Jeff? You've almost exclusively seen them smaller than 8 feet. Uh-oh. We lost him again.
Oh, afraid we lost Jeff. Yeah, just to kind of follow up,
I'm back.
I've been kind of compiling. Oh, Jeff back?
Yeah. We got him back. Go ahead, James.
I've been compiling some of my information and comparing, because I've accumulated within pretty close range of where I'm at right now, probably over 24 sightings now, over a pretty long range of time. I mean, spanning 60 years or more. And the majority of animals that are seen, at least in southeast Texas, that I've looked at personal reports of, tend to be reddish-brown in color. They tend to be around 6 feet tall. Tend to have hair in the range of about 6 inches in length, hangs down, almost like, well, if you would imagine from the Star Wars movies, a Wookiee. Almost that sort of hair and a reddish-brown color. The arms are typically very long relative to the legs, long enough that when they go down on all fours, they don't have to bend over very far. And that is another feature that I see reports of. One of my most interesting encounters, or not encounters, but encounters I've interviewed about, was a mother and daughter who were driving on another farm-to-market road in this area and witnessed a quadrupedal Bigfoot-type animal chasing 4 deer across the highway. And that's something that a person in a ghillie suit or an ape suit or something is never going to be able to run on 4 legs fast enough to keep up with a white-tailed deer.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be moving pretty fast to catch a deer.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And, you know, some people will make the argument, well, some of these things are probably bears or something like that. Well, typically you don't see reddish-brown bears in this part of the country. Even if you did, you're seeing a lot of bipedal activity. You're seeing, in some cases, people that are getting close enough to actually see the faces. The descriptions that I've heard range from something that looks like a Neanderthal to very classic Paddy-type descriptions. So in any case, you're looking at a almost caveman-like face.
Right.
No snout or anything like that.
Has that been your experience as well, Jeff? That you typically have heard about or seen the smaller one?
Yeah, here, all the stuff that I've investigated and everything here in my portion of East Texas, which is mainly, Shelby, Panola County, Russ County, things like that, and over into the portions of DeSoto Parish in Louisiana and around in here, have all been somewhere in the, maybe slightly over 6 foot to less. And like James was saying, bears. Thing is, we don't have bears in East Texas. I mean, I've seen one bear in 43 years. I've seen more Bigfoot than I have seen bears in the past 43 years. Even though we do have a few bears, but they are as rare as anything, and they're very small bears. We don't have the big 300-400 pound black bears like they have in Canada and places like that. We have a very small Louisiana black bear, and they get to be about 100, maybe 150 pounds at the most. And when they're standing on their hind legs, they're maybe 4 feet, maybe a little more tall, close to 5, for a large Louisiana black bear. So if you see something like that run across the road in front of you, it's nowhere near as big as the reports that we've covered of, people saying, whatever ran across the road in front of them.
Yeah, I get just to continue where he was at. I get a very similar sort of feel for the sightings that I've investigated, and then even my own personal sighting. The creature I saw was extremely muscular. Definitely built like a human being, joints like a human being, hands rather than paws, no snout, and it looked directly eye to eye at my wife and I, from what I later estimated to be about 21 feet when I went out there and measured it, and definitely no snout, very human looking, almost had a surprised look on its face, like I didn't expect you to be there. I think probably it was a reckless juvenile that was just out chasing a deer or something and ran out in front of the humans, that nearly ran over it, and it surprised it,
Wendy wants to know what's the scariest account that you've taken in. I know of doing research and other stories outside of my area, you do run across stories of aggression. Now, as far as people that I have personally talked to, most of the aggression has been limited to rock throwing, limb throwing, threat displays in the way of growls. I have one case where I interviewed a couple where the creature beat on the side of their house and tore the head off of a chicken that they had. And I've also talked to some people who had hunting dogs out that received mysterious injuries that were really hard to explain. But there again, they didn't see those injuries occur in person, Right.
I don't have, as far as a direct encounter where I have sat down with someone and interviewed a person, I don't have a example personally of someone who was physically attacked. Now, I've heard several examples of people who had things thrown at them. I talked to a federal employee on the condition that, nothing be revealed about anything who works within the Bigfoot National Preserve that had items thrown at that individual. So I don't think that there's a generalized pattern of attacks. There probably are cases of individual rogue animals that could be dangerous, but if they were commonly dangerous, I think the Bigfoot issue would have probably been settled long ago, because if you had things coming up and routinely attacking humans, they would have long since given themselves away, long since been hunted down, you know.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And like I say, I don't...
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's hard to define. This is a fringe area. It's fringe science might even be stretching it, because no one really can say anything in an empirical fashion. You know, I cannot say to you that this is for 100% a primate of this particular type, because we simply do not have the extremely hard evidence. What we have is a whole lot of evidence in the way of personal experiences, but that's not considered scientific in the sense that it's not empirical. You know, it's not hard and fast. That doesn't mean it's not true. It's just that we cannot prove it in the strongest scientific sense, even though we've had encounters, experiences, talked to people that have had very real experiences. We just cannot prove it to the satisfaction of the scientific community.
Right. Wasn't there a story of one that ran a woman off the road? She ended up wrecking her car?
Yeah, that actually occurred very close to where I live. Basically, I do not have complete details on that story because the individual has remained anonymous. And I've had to speak indirectly to someone about it. But there was an individual that was driving down there again, a farm to market road in Polk County, southeast Polk County, and the individual had a bipedal, very large animal run out in front of that person, evaded hitting it, and wrecked their car. I've attempted to find the police report, which actually apparently does exist, of the accident, but because of a difference in compatibility between computer systems and the fact that the record of that crash is relatively old, I haven't yet been able to actually get my hands on the police report from that. It'd actually be a sheriff's department report or highway patrol.
Well, Jeff ought to be able to help out with that. He's going to still have some connections in that realm.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. I've got, my wife and I founded an organization we call, well, it's not really an organization, it's not that well organized. We founded a group that we call East Texas Unusual. Right now we have 8 investigators, and 3 of us do cryptozoology. My wife and 4 others do the paranormal end of things. And you'd be surprised, once you announce out there that, you're looking to hear these stories and people develop a trust that you're not going to give away their identities, because that's a big aspect of it. A lot of people do not want to come out and tell their story because they're afraid of ridicule. An amazing variety of stories come out. In our paranormal team's example, that's especially amazing. There is a significant portion of the population that's had encounters along the paranormal lines, some of them quite scary. And then on the cryptozoology side, it's very rare to find an East Texas hunter that's hunted for very long that hasn't seen an animal that most scientists would consider not to exist. The best example of that's Black Panther.
Right.
Absolutely. We'll tell you that there's no such thing as Black Panther. Now, you can argue about the definitions of what a Black Panther is, genetically speaking, but the truth is, anybody who spent much time in the woods over a period of years has in all likelihood seen a black panther. I could find you, just in the area that I research in, dozens and dozens of people who have all seen a black panther, yet it's an unrecognized animal as a species. Now, like I say, you can argue about whether or not it's truly a separate species or what constitutes a black panther, but the fact is they're out there. People are seeing real animals, but those sightings are not officially recognized.
Yeah.
It's a much tougher sell.
Yeah, I spoke to Chester Moore in one of my interviews, and we talked about that a bit.
Yeah, Chester's a great guy.
It's a weird thing.
Another guy like Jeff, who just has Chester has a world of experience out there in the woods, feet on the ground, coming across animals that most people never see, able to identify and imitate just about anything out there that you could possibly imagine, that exists here in East Texas, which East Texas, I have seen some very strong arguments for East Texas being the most biologically diverse area in the American continents outside of the Amazon.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know that, I could prove that, but I would not doubt it either. I've seen that claim made by several biologists, because you've got species of carnivorous plants, you've got a multitude of birds, just worlds of different kinds of mammals, reptiles,
bugs.
Yeah, all in an area that is surprisingly unpopulated, because there are sections of East Texas that have similar population densities to portions of places like the Congo, I think those areas aren't large, but still, there are places out here in East Texas where you can go up into a spot where no human being has been probably in the last 75 years or so,
Yeah. What do you fellas think about the possibility of there being a government cover-up?
I'm kind of...
there's always a possibility of a government cover-up in anything that you do, and not for the exact reasons, in my opinion, that a lot of people think. The conspiracy doesn't have to be as involved as some people give it credit for, because here's the deal. Even with black panthers and other species, East Texas is made up of oil and gas and timber industries. If you could not log your timber, then East Texas would starve. If you couldn't drill those wells on your property, East Texas would starve to death. And if it's found that you have one of the rarest, most endangered species on the planet living on your property, then you're no longer going to be able to cut your timber because it's a sanctuary. You're no longer going to be able to drill for oil or gas on that property because it's encroaching on their sanctuary. So, it can be more in depth than that, but at the same time, it can be as simple as that also.
Yeah, I kind of have a similar take. I have kind of mixed feelings on the idea of government cover-up. On one hand, I feel like there, among a lot of officials of various types, there's an instinctive need to conceal anything that they're not required to tell you about. So I think at some level there would be a tendency to keep things quiet just because they have an instinctive need to keep things quiet. The other part of that is I don't think anybody official wants to be that first guy that steps out there and says, yes, these things are real, because no one else is going to step out there with him. So no biologist is going to stand up and say, yeah, I've got proof of a Bigfoot, because it's instant career suicide. So I think that plays into, I don't know that there's a formal conspiracy to hide anything. For one thing, I think the government's horrible at hiding secrets as a rule. But on the other side of that, I think there may be a functional conspiracy in that no biologist, nobody official wants to be that guy, that ends up being shoved out of his career and doing something other than what he wants to do because he stuck his head up and said something that was not accepted by the community at large.
Yeah. What do you think they eat as per season? Do you think they change their diet according to?
Well, my take on that, and I'm sure Jeff probably has more experience in that sort of area, but my take is I believe they're probably great apes, and as such they're omnivores. They're probably mostly opportunistic in that they'll eat anything that they can eat and digest, and being omnivores, that probably is a extremely wide range of foods that ranges from small animals to large game to fruits and any other type of vegetation that they might be able to get their hands on and eat. But then again, I am making an assumption there that you're talking about an omnivore, that you're talking about a great ape.
Right.
Well, I tend to call them more of what I coined the term of a megavore rather than a omnivore or carnivore, because now this is just my theory. I mean, I have no proof of this, just like we have no proof of anything else, but it's just a theory based on the vegetation that I know is available in the forests around here and the vegetation that is edible to even deer and other fauna.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Bigfoot has the capability of eating things that most other animals either find unpalatable or undigestible. I think they can eat more woody type plants and trees, things like that. I think they may even be able to eat some plants and things that might even be slightly toxic to other animals. I think they may have developed a highly specialized digestive system over the years so that they can ingest things that other animals don't.
Right.
Yeah, I think it definitely would be. I think Jeff's right. It would definitely be the case that whatever their natural food is, it has to be a wide range of foods. I don't think that they would have the luxury of being a specialized eater of one particular type of food. They would have to be able to consume a wide range of different foods. And there's an interesting correlation, because I study not only sightings here in East Texas and principally Southeast Texas, but also study sightings all across the country that other investigators have made records of, and almost universally you're seeing sightings in conifer forest. There's a correlation. I'm not sure what the causation is there, but I think it's one thing that leads credibility to the idea of these sightings is the fact that these sightings basically occur near waterways in conifer forest, almost exclusively. Probably there are a few examples that aren't, but the vast majority of them are definitely going to be in something resembling a pine forest that has a very wet habitat, which would be unusual if everything was hoaxes and everything was somebody's imagination.
Right. When you guys do investigations, do you go out with other researchers in your area, such as Bob Garrett, Chester? I know you guys go out with Chester.
I don't get a lot of opportunity to. I love to. I'd love to get the opportunity. I have not been out with Bob Garrett. I've sat down a number of times with Chester. Actually haven't managed to go out in the woods with him. We've been able to sit down together, and he's enlightened me on a lot of his experiences and things like that. Definitely planning on getting out in the woods with him. I've gotten out in the woods with some other guys that Chester has worked with, some like Bobby Hamilton and some of the guys that he investigates with. I've gotten the opportunity to get out with them, and just love doing it because you're all talking about all these guys, this crop of investigators out here like Jeff and Bobby and Chester and the other guys that run with them you're looking at people who really have their feet on the ground out there in the woods doing stuff, and they're spending hours and hours and hours every year doing it. And so anytime you get to sit down and talk to them, I definitely go for the opportunity, because I learn so much just from their own experiences and being out there with them to pick up investigation tips and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend, Chester and I, we have the Southern Panther Research Project together. We've worked together for a lot of years. Chester's, one of my best friends in the whole world. I help him with his Children's Kingdom Ministries and the Kingdom Zoo. I help him out with that when I can. Personally, I'll go out with just about anybody. If somebody wants to go out and they contact me and they're like, man, can we go out? I don't believe in secrets. I don't have any kind of secret research. I don't have any kind of secret locations or anything like that, because I'm not hiding anything, and that's when I start distrusting people. When people have secret locations and, they don't want to take you to their location because, it's a secret and things like that. And I'm like, well, what are you hiding? Because, it's not like you're going to take me out there and, I'm sorry, I don't subscribe to the habituation stuff. That's all baloney in my opinion, because if anybody had Bigfoot eating out of a dog food bowl, eating PB&J out of a dog food bowl, then we would have all the evidence we would ever need.
Oh, yeah, if I did, I would definitely already have, I would already be all over the news.
If Bigfoot was sitting around my campfire like some of these habituators want you to believe, singing Kumbaya with me, believe me, there would be some 8x10 glossies of me and the big fella, clear, clean pictures, and I'd be like, hey, buddy, can I get a few of those toenail clippings, just a couple.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me groom you a little.
I 100% agree on the secret thing. The only time I keep any kind of secrets is I have people who will say they want to remain anonymous, but the information they give...
Oh, yeah, of course you have to respect people's anonymity.
Yeah,
and I respect that, because if those people don't want any kind of recognition and they're coming forth and telling you a story, they have no motivation for telling you this story unless they are just a pathological liar.
Yeah.
If they want to tell you a story and they're like, look, I just don't want this to get around because I don't want people to think I'm nuts.
Oh,
I respect that.
Yeah, I do that, and the other thing that I do is I have certain areas that we investigate that, because of private property concerns, because of hoaxing concerns, we kind of have a system of code names. Like there's an area in the Big Thicket National Preserve that we've called Hotel. We just made a list and went down alphabetically, and there's an area that within East Texas Unusual, our group, we refer to it as Hotel. It's an area where I had a threat display done at me. Well, if I say the specific location, I'm afraid that somebody's going to get out there while I'm investigating and try to hoax me, So that sort of secrets, yeah, but if Jeff or anybody wants to know any of the gleanings that I have found, they're 100% available. I think that's essential. There's been too many people within the Bigfoot community who have tried to maintain secrets, and the honest truth is I'm probably never going to prove anything, but I might provide a piece of evidence or information that allows someone else to do it. And if I could do that, I'd absolutely happy to do it,
I think
and
cool.
I guess my goal is I'm not as keen on proving the existence necessarily to everybody and their brother as I want to be. I've had 2 close encounters, but they were very short close encounters. I would love to be able to get close enough just to watch one of these creatures for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, just so I could watch it and look how it moves and watch its body language and really study its facial features close and, maybe look through binoculars at it and really validate to myself that the two very short encounters I had, that, what I saw is 100% what I saw.
That's definitely me. I would love to be able to 100% validate to myself what I saw, because every time I sit down and think about that, I think, where did I go wrong in my interpretation of this? This has got to be something else. Yet in all my research, time and time again, I run across people whose experience parallels mine. I haven't been able to lay my eyes a second time on one. I have managed to get close enough to one that was in concealment that it gave a threat display in the form of a growlish grunt sort of thing back at me, that caused us both to go in opposite directions. But I'm definitely attempting to lay my eyes on one for a second time. I've come close to it. The area that we refer to as hotel. We have had, myself and a couple other investigators may have had something thrown at us in that area by one on a separate investigation. It was a large limb that was basically landed, stuck in the mud, not too far away from where we were, that did not come down out of a tree. And that's also the area where we had the threat. My daughters used to investigate with me a lot, and they were with me when we had the growl, I call it a threat display, back at us in that same area.
What made you think that growl was Bigfoot and not something else?
Basically what happened that day is my daughters and I have two daughters. We were out just investigating that area. We had something following us coming back out of the woods, which is not too unusual. A lot of times when you're out in the woods, you'll get something following you, whether it's a dog or a deer or whatever, moving in the same direction as you. Didn't think a lot of it, but something very heavy. And just before we got to the end of our investigation, I asked my oldest daughter she does a very good scream, and we don't do a lot of screams and howls and stuff, but just for the heck of it, I told her, do a scream for me. And she did a scream, and when she did, it responded with a growl or grunt that it was in between those two that was so deep, so loud, that it vibrated my chest. And it was probably maybe 40 yards or give or take 10 yards up through a thicket, Yopon-type thicket from us. And I can't imagine what else that would have been at that volume and the sound. I've gone back and listened to recordings of different types of common animals in our area and even other areas. And other than some great ape-type noises, I haven't found anything that comes real close to it.
I see. Make sure we still got Jeff. Nope. We lost the beginning.
Did we lose Jeff? Yeah,
yeah, man. It keeps dropping, man. Sorry, guys. I live way out in the woods. When I say I live way out in the woods, I mean they got to pipe sunshine in here. They don't have to pipe the heat in, but they got to pipe the sunshine.
Well, I wanted to ask you about your encounters, Jeff. I know you had one jump out of a tree. Was that the one when you were a kid, or is that the more recent one?
No, that's the one that was a little over a year ago.
Okay. Well, let's start with the first one. Tell me about the one when you were a kid.
First encounter, I was 15 years old, a couple of friends. We had a camp house down on the Sabine River in Panola County. I was practically born on the river. My dad had been taking me to the river since I was 6 months old. So hunting, fishing, trapping, and all that, nothing new to me. Animals in the woods, I mean, Nothing bothered me. We had caught a whole bunch of fish that day, and we cleaned them over an old hand pump well that we had. And we left the guts laying on the ground in the idea that later that night we'd come back over and use a flashlight or whatever, and if there were some raccoons or possums or something eating on those guts, you know, we'd shoot them. You still with me?
Yep.
All right, making sure I hadn't lost you. And we cooked our fish over the fire, and we laid around the campfire drinking sodas and talking about football or whatever we were talking about. And about 10:30, 11 o'clock that night, it was good and dark, I told my buddies, I said, come on, let's go walk back over there and see if there's any coons. And they didn't want to go. They were, you know, in their sleeping bags around the campfire, just shooting the breeze, you know. It was hot, so we weren't sleeping inside the camp house because we had no AC. We were going to sleep outside. And I grabbed my .22 and a flashlight and walked back over to the old well. And when I got about 25 or 30 yards, I could tell that there was something that was at the gut pile, but it looked bigger than a raccoon. I thought it was either 3 or 4 raccoons or it was a hog. So I started slipping up real easy because I figured if it was a hog, I was going to have to get a shot right behind the ear so it didn't tear me up because I just had a .22. And I got about 20 yards from it whenever my flashlight beam, you know.
Oh, we're losing you, Jeff.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Now I can.
All right. Just had an old 2 or 3 cell C-cell flashlight, yellow beam, nothing special. But when I guess I got close enough that my beam caught its attention rather than what it was eating on, it stood up. Stood up on 2 legs. Turned, and it was looking me dead in my eyes. And I'm shining my light on this thing, and my first thoughts are, this is somebody messing with me. And, you know, I'm like, hey, man, this ain't funny. I don't know who you are, but this ain't funny. I'm going to shoot you. I mean, I was talking to it. And it didn't say nothing. It was just looking at me. And I said, mister, I don't know who you are, but I am scared, and I am going to shoot you. And it just stood there, and it just looked at me. And I've got my gun leveled at it, but, you know, raised the way I was raised, I mean, you just don't shoot somebody, you know, and if something is standing on 2 legs and looking at you, it's somebody. No matter how different it looks than you, it's somebody. And right. I never will forget as long as I live. It took 3 steps backwards, toe to heel. And I remember that distinctively. It was toe to heel, backwards, in a fluid motion. And when it reached the edge of the woods, it turned and walked away. Not ran, but walked away kind of fast, but not running. And I go back over and I tell my friends what I saw, and they're like, yeah, whatever, you know, lie to us again. You're just trying to scare us, you know, blah, blah, blah. Well, I slept all night long just scared to death. I clutched that little .22 rifle all night long. Didn't sleep a bit. Next morning, as soon as it got daylight, we jumped up. I told them, come on, let's go over here to the guts and the gut pile. We went over there, and where the old well, we had pumped the water, you know, it made mud down there, and there were tracks. And I wear a size 14 triple E boot. And I had on a pair of tennis shoes then, stepped in that track. And no, it wasn't a 20-inch track or anything like that, but I was capable of stepping in the bare footprint of whatever was there. So it had at least a 16-inch long track. And, you know, they were like, yeah, you did that. You know, you made that track and everything. So I shut up. I didn't tell anybody anything else. I didn't mention it to anybody for years and years and years. Just from, you know, being scared of being ridiculed. And that was my first encounter.
Yeah, I think
you there?
after getting, yep, I think after getting ridiculed once or twice, that most people kind of back off from telling their story, and they don't really come out until usually years later. They'll be looking around on YouTube or something, and something will remind them of it, and then they get interested and they start.
Well, I told my dad. I told my dad about it, and my dad, he didn't even believe me. He thought that, you boys been down there drinking, hadn't you? And we weren't. All we had was sodas. We didn't have any alcohol or anything. So, but that was his first accusing us of drinking down there. And almost 10 years later, my dad and I, we had caught probably about 150 pounds worth of catfish on some trot lines, and we had put them in what we call a live box, which a live box is a couple of old chicken coops that are wired together, tie a rope on it, float it out in the water, and put your fish in it, and it keeps them alive until you're ready to skin them.
Right.
That coop probably weighed about 40 pounds, 50 pounds, and had 150 pounds of fish in it. So you're talking 200 pounds. Had a rope tied on it. The door was spring hinged that had a lip that you had to pull it backwards and then lift it up. And when you put it down, it spring loaded and went under that lip, so it was pretty hard to open. Plus, I had the fish home the next morning. We caught the fish, put them in the fish box. The next morning, Dad said, hey, let's go clean our fish and let's have a fish fry. And I said, okay. Now, this is February, about 34 degrees. Maybe, it was a good frost on the ground. We go down there to get our fish, and the box is pulled completely out of the water up onto dry land. The lid is open. The knot was untied, and the lid was open. And something had sat right there and ate about 10 2-pound catfish, 2 to 4-pound catfish. I had eaten all of the soft, fleshy parts off of the back and the side of the fish, left the head and ate most of the guts, but threw the heads down on the ground. And all around the trap were bare, human-looking footprints. Now, we're talking 34 degrees. There's nobody in their right mind that's running around in the wet mud, barefooted, in 34-degree weather. And on top of that, right, they wanted to eat raw fish out of my fish box while they're barefooted. So that made no sense to me. My dad looked at me, and he said, there's only one thing that could have done this. And I said, what's that, Daddy? He said, the stories you told are true. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, Bigfoot's real. And I said, yeah, Daddy, Bigfoot's real. And ever since that day, he's been a believer.
At least you got that bit of validation, Yeah,
that was a really nice bit of validation for me. Just that my dad, had that experience with me. And, for my dad to tell me, I believe you now. Those stories you were telling were true. I believe you. And that was on the same property that the first sighting was on. And, of course, that wasn't a sighting, but it was somewhat of an interaction. It wasn't necessarily an encounter. But on that same piece of property, about 8 or 9 years later, which would have been about almost 2 years ago, we were driving down going to that same fishing camp. We were going to look at the water, see what it looked like, so we could go fishing the next day. See if we could put our boat in if the water was, enough water in the river for me to put my bass boat in the water. And we were driving out, and my dad said, right up here there's a sand ridge, and on the other side of that there's a slough. And he said, that old slough bed's got a bunch of mayhaw trees in it. For anybody that doesn't know what mayhaws are like a sweet little crabapple type apple. We make jams and jellies out of them. They're about big around as the end of your finger. They're real small, but they taste like an apple. And he said, stop down there, and I want you to walk down through that bottom. This was April. And he said, I want you to walk down through there because it's time for those mayhaws to be putting on fruit. I said, okay, no problem. So I stopped. I got out, and I grabbed my rifle. I grabbed my camera, as I always do. Get pictures of, snakes, hogs, anything I come across. Had my gun just in case a hog or something got after me. And I started walking down that old slough bed, and I got about 100, 150 yards down that old slough bed, and I heard a loud crash to my left. And I immediately turned, and I went over to see what that crash was, thinking that, maybe there was a hog in the bushes over there, or raccoon, fox, coyote, who knows. Just some kind of critter in the bushes. And as I walked over, I noticed that it was a stick laying there. It was about big around as a Coke can and about 2 foot long. It wasn't a rotten stick either. It was a good, sturdy stick. And as I'm looking at that stick, I hear a loud thud right behind me. And it was close enough behind me that I actually felt the earth kind of tremble a little bit under my feet as we were on an old dried up slough bed, which is still kind of muddy, so the earth would move just a little bit. And I turn around, and there's a creature sitting there. And he squatted down with his butt resting on his heels. It's got both hands flat on the ground. And I'm looking, and I'm going, what in the hell am I seeing? And I immediately reach back to grab for my rifle. And as I grab for my rifle, just something makes me think, camera. And I let go of the rifle, and I grabbed camera. And I had the lens cap on, and I pulled the lens cap off. And when I pulled the lens cap off, I dropped it. And it had the little tether on it, and it hit the side of my camera. And when it hit the side of my camera, it made a noise. And when it made that noise, this creature took off running so fast. I just hit the button and started taking pictures. And I had it set on burst mode where it would take, when you push the button once, it'd take 30 pictures. Mm-hmm. And this thing covered a 60-yard opening in like 3 seconds. From a dead stop to gone in 3 seconds.
That's crazy. That is a fast creature.
I've never seen anything that could run that fast. Like I said, I played a lot of sports in high school, college, and I saw a lot of fast athletes, track stars. I saw guys that could run 4.4 40-yard dashes. 4.4 seconds to cover 40 yards, and they weren't as fast as this creature was.
Was it one of the shorter ones?
It couldn't have been over 6 foot tall. Even though it was crouched in front of me, and it was kind of hard to tell, but as it was crouched in front of me, it was waist high. Its head was like waist high to me. So even if it stood up, it couldn't have done much more than doubled its body height. And I'm 6 foot tall, and it was just had to be about my height. There might have been an inch difference between us, but that would have been about it.
What about its musculature? Like, sometimes you hear people say that it looked like a basketball player. Sometimes you hear people say that it looked like the biggest linebacker that they've ever seen.
Yeah, it was solid built. This thing was not massive, but it was solid built. I would say that it probably, in my estimation, you're talking 6 foot, maybe 6'1", 245, 250 pounds.
That was kind of my experience as well. What I saw, I'm about 6'4", And what I saw was every bit as broad as me, even though it was only around 5 feet tall, and extremely muscular.
Yeah, and most of the people that I talk to, when I really press them for a height, even the people that at first claim 9 or 10 feet tall, when I start pressing them, I come away with the feeling that, you know, we probably had a creature that was somewhere between 7 foot and 6 foot. You know, because, you know, people don't really realize how massive a 9 or 10 foot tall creature would be. You're talking 1,000+ pound creature if it was 9 feet tall.
Right.
You're talking about an animal that would have to eat where a human being can get by on 2 pounds of food a day. You're talking about a creature that weighs 1,000 pounds that would have to have 50 pounds of food a day to maintain a girth, a mass of that size. And
yeah, it would take a lot of calories to.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to think, I mean, if you equate it to the only 2 animals that we know of that are close to that size would be, you know, the brown bear and the mountain gorilla. A mountain gorilla needs 60 pounds of food a day to maintain its mass. They spend 23 hours a day either sleeping or eating. That's all they do. A brown bear, when they're not hibernating, they eat 90 pounds of food a day to maintain their body mass. They spend 20 hours a day foraging for food. So you're talking about a Bigfoot creature that's of that same reported body mass. You're talking about a creature that would be spending 20+ hours a day foraging for food. We would be seeing that creature more readily. You know, they would be in the pastures if they eat grass. They would be in the yopons if they ate yopons. They would be in whatever they eat. If they were, you know, if they had to eat that much, your cows and your horses would be on the menu on a daily basis. And somebody would have brought one strapped across the hood of the Ford by now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's a natural tendency.
But you give them a more human proportion. Like I said, 7 foot or less, because we got to remember, you know, we have basketball players like Shaquille O'Neal and Yao Ming and people like that are over 7 feet tall, but they still have a body weight of around 350 pounds or less. So they can get by on 3 or 4 pounds of food a day. Well, if you've got a specialized digestive system and you can kill one hog that weighs 250 pounds and you don't get sick because you're eating tainted meat, that hog, you could hide in a briar patch and eat on that hog for a week or more, maybe 2. And if you can eat vegetation that nothing else can hardly eat, then you could hide in the most dense vegetation and eat without having to come out. Just, you know, those are just some of my theories.
Yeah, some of my speculations kind of run along the same lines. I personally, just speculating, think that they must have metabolisms, if you're talking about a real biological creature, that run closer to a large human athlete's metabolism. So you're talking about a relatively large number of calories, but not an astronomical number of calories. That would allow a larger creature to be able to live in an area without having an extremely large impact on the vegetation or animals in the area. Because remember, you've got to have a breeding population. So if you're looking at having one of these creatures, then you have to have multiples of these creatures. And it would be hard to sustain multiple 10-foot tall, 1,200-pound animals in an area. But if you're talking about an animal that had a metabolism closer to a large human that was, say, anywhere between 6 and 7.5 feet tall, you'd be looking at something that probably could have the capacity to live in an area and go fairly well unnoticed.
Mm-hmm. What do you
exactly? You know, there's a lot of people. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask, what's been y'all's experience with their like bedding or nesting or burrows, or have you ever come across any like stick structures that you would think was a nest, or had people talk about that in your area?
I've come across quite a few on my property of back before I knew anything, when I was, in my early 20s, things like that, that I would ask people, because it was very curious to me as someone who knows animal life very well. I was finding what I call beaver huts up on dry land. And I would find them quite often. And, a few times I crawled inside of them to see what was in them. And, everybody was like, oh, maybe when it was flooded, they built that whenever the river was flooded or something. And now that the waters went down, the beavers are back down in the water. And I just accepted that as an answer. And then I found places like in the middle of especially like if I'm trailing a deer, like if I'm bow hunting or something, I wound a deer and I'm trailing the blood through, and deer's going in through a big thicket that you got to get on your hands and knees and crawl through. And oftentimes you'll get in the middle of that briar patch, in the middle of that thicket, and it'll open up just a little bit, and you'll notice where things have been laying all around on the ground. And of course you say, oh, this is where the deer are bedding up, or a sounder of hogs must have laid in here and been living in here. And you just move on because you're tracking or trailing a deer. And so those are some of the things I've found.
I've seen some very similar things. There's one area in particular that I've got in mind that's a piece of private property that we investigate on a little. And one of the unusual things that we find there is we'll find a pine tree that'll be about the size of your forearm that's been broken off, transported, say, 50 yards or so, and then shoved back into the ground, say 6, 8, maybe all the way up to 12 inches, and then bent between a couple other trees. And even if they're not stuck in the ground, we've ran across some spots where they were woven between 2 or 3 trees. So it would be an unusual circumstance for just a random fall. We've seen some of that. I've seen some substantially large grass bedding type things. That would be like 6 feet or so in diameter, but I have no way of knowing exactly what created those beds. But there'd be very thick grass over about like a 6-foot area, maybe even a little bit bigger than that. So I'm definitely seeing things related to what some people would call tree structures. Unfortunately, I can't say for 100% sure what created them because I don't have a single case of anyone who's ever, as far as I'm aware, nobody does, of anyone seeing a Bigfoot-type creature creating a tree structure or a bed or anything like that, although it stands to reason that it does occur. I definitely have seen some unusual things in the way of positioning of trees and limbs and things like that out in the middle of some places that don't get a lot of human activity,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've never had anybody, tell me they've seen a creature building any kind of a structure or anything like that. And one of my early papers that I had written it concerning mainly the northern states, the reason why, maybe that you don't find a lot of places where these creatures are bedding is because they're utilizing bear dens. it would make sense that if a Bigfoot that lived up north where it was snowy and everything, not a lot of vegetation, snowstorm comes in, bears are in their dens hibernating. If a Bigfoot can smell that bear and he can find that den, go into that den, kill the bear, and then live inside that den and eat on that bear's carcass for, if it's a 300 or 400 pound bear, could possibly eat on it for several weeks. Stay inside the den, you're warm, you're cozy, you're protected, and you've got food. Anybody comes along, sticks their head in the bear den and sees something big and hairy inside of a bear den, well, it's got to be a bear. Springtime thaw comes along. People find a bunch of bear bones and a dead bear, parts of a dead bear in an old den. Oh, man, look, that bear died. Coyotes must have ate it. Nobody thinks twice about it. And, that's just a theory. I don't have any proof of that, but, that's just coming from someone that hunts and, is considered one of the, top wildlife experts around here. So, it's just a theory.
Well, it's a logical assumption that you're going to have bedding and areas where you're essentially going to have dens. Any creature out there in the woods, whether it's big or small, is going to have areas where it's going to take shelter. And so if these creatures are out here, then it's logical to assume that there should be evidence of their bedding down or denning up in various areas. That's actually one of my pet ideas as far as if we do ever get hard evidence that doesn't come from like a random road crossing or something like that, it may in fact come from a bedding situation where you've got someone that comes up and finds a bedding area and the creature makes the mistake of using that bedding area over a period of time. Well, there you've got a situation where that particular creature could be potentially filmed or leave behind DNA evidence or something like that. Although I kind of find DNA evidence problematic because DNA labs have databases. Do what?
I said because I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I said because there's nothing to compare it to.
Well, that's the thing. DNA labs have databases that they compare their samples against, and no DNA lab is ever going to take a sample from a Bigfoot, test it, and then say we have DNA from a Bigfoot because they're going to consult their database. They're not going to find a match. So the only result that they can ever honestly come up with is a result that says we didn't identify this. It may be similar to something else, but we were unable to identify it because they simply do not have the samples to make those connections.
And if they're close to human, they seem to be, then it would lean towards them saying that it's been contaminated or something like that.
Oh, or just a straight up human. If I were a DNA lab tech and I found a DNA sample that was 99% like a match to an animal, say a human, then I would say I had identified that particular animal, and so it would be a very easy leap for a technician to take a sample of DNA from a Bigfoot, find that it's 99% similar to a human, and say, well, that's the closest match in our database, therefore this is human DNA. And you could absolutely understand why they would come to that conclusion because there's nothing else for them to match it to that's out there.
Right.
I've had quite a few samples that I've sent to various laboratories to get tested, DNA tested, and it's not a cheap process if you're on a budget. And whenever you get them back, it's very frustrating because on one particular sample, the mitochondrial DNA, which, that's about all you can afford to have done because it costs even more if they try to extract the nuclear DNA. It comes back as, 99.93% human. And in parentheses it says contaminated, because it didn't come back as 100% human. So the small percentage that was not human, they consider contamination.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm saying.
That we have had, well, the few that we've had the nuclear DNA done on as well comes back as non-human primate, and the mitochondrial is 99% human, and immediately, they've got a side note there that says, specimen contaminated, possible contamination or obvious contamination. There's some kind of a side note always, and they go immediately to, well, this sample had to be contaminated. This can't be what this sample is.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely going to be the case. I don't think that DNA samples are going to be real fruitful as far as the absolute proof that anyone wants. It's like photographs. Even photographs that aren't blob squatches are easy to dismiss. And in truth, a lot of them aren't what they purport to be. Matter of fact, the majority of them probably aren't what they report to be. So it's tough. It's something that...
Yeah, it is. It's very tough.
Now, my little group, we haven't attempted to get into the area of DNA samples. The only thing that we do physical examination. The last bit of hair that we took in, one of our investigators saw on a barbed wire fence, and by physical examination of the area we were in and by physical examination of the hair, we were eventually able to figure out it was horsehair in that particular case. But when we first picked it up, it looked good. I mean, it was nice long length and had a texture that wasn't exactly what we were expecting to see, but it just didn't pan out. And then that unfortunately is always, not always, but almost always the case when you run across
So
something.
if you ever need any hair or anything looked at, I have a laboratory set up in my man cave, so to speak, and I have 2 different microscopes, and I have one that has a 1200x digital zoom, and then I have another one that has a 2000x zoom. And so we can get right down, and I have a complete database of known hair samples that we can look and we can compare the medullas, and we can compare, put them side by side on the screen and compare two different hairs and see if they're horse or cow or whatever.
Yeah, we'll definitely be taking you up because we have a little setup, but it's nothing very sophisticated. And so, yeah, we definitely at some point will probably take you up on that.
Mine's not really that sophisticated. It's just, one of those deals where you run across a really good deal on, a piece of equipment, and you just got to jump on it, and then of course I've taught myself over many, many hours of poring over data, that it's very easy now with the computer age. You find out how easy it is whenever, you can take on a computer screen, a high-def screen, and you can put split screen, and you can put a hair here and the hair that you have over here, and you can put them in. It's like matching up ballistics on a bullet. You can match riflings up, and you can match hair up. And it just gives you an idea of whether your sample is worth, it gives you an idea that, is this sample worth sending to someone and spending a little money on to get an analysis of it? If you look at it and it's without a doubt a horse hair or a cow hair, you toss it in the trash and you go, oh man, I was all excited. But if you scour your database and it doesn't match anything you've got, then you say, okay, well, I might spend $100 to see what this is.
Right. One of the things about hair is that you can besides the DNA end of it, if you can look at the whole hair, you can tell if it's ever been cut before. So
exactly.
At that point, you can rule out human.
Yeah, that's always a good giveaway.
Human DNA, you can rule out the human because
and even some horse hair.
Right.
Because, people trim their manes and trim their tails if it's a well taken care of and well groomed horse. I've had horse hairs that, you put under the microscope and that's horsehair, but I had one that was a horsehair, but it had been colored. It had been bleached. And you could look at it and tell that it had been bleached. And you're like going, what the heck? But then you start thinking, well, if this is somebody that's got a horse that they rodeo or they're one of those show riders or something like that, barrel racers, they may have wanted their horse's mane to be blonde, and they may have colored their horse's hair.
Right. Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, very definitely. That's kind of what we have been doing here lately. I investigated very informally for a number of years, and then I believe that, I don't know if it's the popularity of the Bigfoot shows or why, but there has been a real increase in the number of people who are stepping up and telling stories. I don't know if there's an increase in the number of people that are seeing things, but there's a definite increase in people willing to tell their story, and it kind of got to the point where my wife and I, we eventually organized our own little group around it. And, we're actually, of course, we all work and have regular things that we do, but we're definitely staying busy. We have no shortage of people that we can talk to. And the majority of the people that we talk to, we come away with the idea that they've legitimately seen something. There was one man.
Exactly.
There was a man we interviewed recently that he waited nearly 60 years to tell his story. It was something that happened to him when he was a little kid, and told his story 60 years later. Because he finally got to the point where he was willing to, tell somebody.
Yeah, that's a long time to hold something in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most definitely.
Well, we're getting close to the end of this here. I see Wendy wants me to ask you a couple things. She wants to know about goat squatch. I love the silence that comes on that one.
Yeah, no, I'll leave that one to Jeff.
It's quite funny because here on Lake Merval, here just a few miles in Gary, Texas, just probably 20 minutes from my home, there actually is reported sightings of what they call the Goatman. And it is basically a goat squatch, I guess you would say, but we call him the Goatman. And this character, this creature, this person, this entity, whatever you want to call it, has been seen for over 25 years down around that area. And it was a lot of sightings. Actually, it first started up back in the 70s, and it died down, and then there were a few sightings in the 80s, and there hasn't really been any sightings for quite a long time, and that now, in the past 3 to 5 weeks, I've gotten 6 reports of that exact same Goatman, they call him, on the exact same stretch of highway that goes around the lake that it was sighted in all those years ago. So my investigation into it is quite in its infancy stage. I've got so many things going on right now. I have an investigation going on with a creature that was walking on 4 legs, had a tail like a horse, and a head like a human. So immediately, I'm going, there's a centaur in Nacogdoches County. And, I've gotten several, like 4 or 5 eyewitness reports of that. And I've got a lady that swears up and down in Nacogdoches County that Bigfoot is living in a thicket just a few miles from her house because they've seen it about 10 times. So I've got so many investigations going on right now that it's hard for me to do a lot with the Goatman, but I do have an investigation that is going to take place on that.
What I've run into really doesn't involve reports of Goatman so much as my non-Bigfoot humanoid type stories that I run across would generally either be classified as something like a dogman, which you could make the argument that those are one and the same creature, just being described slightly differently, or things that would probably fall into the paranormal arena. I have a kind of a strong correlation between paranormal reports occurring in some of the same areas where you've got Bigfoot reports, and I don't know that there's causation there, but there's kind of a mild correlation between the two.
Paranormal reports such as like lights in the woods and UFOs and stuff?
Lights in the woods, humanoid figures, what some people would call ghosts or spirits, or, something like that, where they're watching an individual cross a road and then that individual just disappears mid-stride in the middle of the road, that sort of thing. I'm not saying that there's a connection between the Bigfoot sightings and that. I don't go in that direction, but while we're on the topic of non-Bigfoot humanoid type sightings, I don't get reports of Goatman. I have one probably dogmanish report, and the others would fall into the spirits or ghost or that type of thing.
I have a question that I think I've asked it nearly every single episode, and it's because I can't figure it out, and that's why do you think that Bigfoot seems to cross the road in front of cars so often?
My answer to that is that that's where the people are, and there has to be people for there to be a sighting. On any given day, I walk out my front door, I get in my car, I drive to work, I drive back home. Weekend comes, I load the family up, I drive back down the same road. I go do whatever I'm doing in an area where I'm not generally going to see a Bigfoot unless I happen to be hunting, and there again, that's the second most common type of sighting. So I think you see the road crossing sightings purely because that's where the people are. That's the most common location a human being is in where they're going to potentially see a Bigfoot, where that Bigfoot is transitioning between one area of a forest to another area of a forest, and their only way to do that is to cross a strip of pavement. And there just happens to be a car coming along because the Bigfoot's in a hurry or reckless or for whatever reason.
And see, I agree with that, and I'll go a step further. Also, that's where the roadkill is, on roads. And that's where deer hang out, or down the sides of roads. That's where all the animals are, because the county and the state plant red clover, crimson clover, down the sides of the roads for erosion. Well, that's what deer and other animals like to eat, is that crimson clover. So Sasquatch traveling down the road because, one, it's a free, easy meal if he finds roadkill, a fresh dead deer. Two, he can hunt along that road, and deer probably aren't going to pay any noise that much attention because they're so used to cars coming up and down the road. And whenever you see one crossing the road, you've either startled it while it's hunting or you've just come up on it while it was looking for a dead rabbit or a dead deer on the side of the road.
Well, that's a good point. Not to mention the path of least resistance. It's a lot easier to walk down the road to get to one place than it would be to amble through the bushes.
Right, and I'm like James, that's where the people are. That's where, how many people a day are running cars up and down the roads? If there weren't, but say back in the 1940s, whenever there probably weren't 10 cars a day going down a highway, well, nobody probably ever saw a Bigfoot. But now, when that same stretch of highway, you may have 600 cars a day, even on a rural farm-to-market road. You may have 600 cars a day go down that road. Well, the chance of one person in one of those cars seeing something is multiplied greatly.
Yeah, that's true. It's just something that I find it odd, because they seem so elusive, and it's hard to find them out in the woods. But you just drive your car up and down the road enough, and you'll see one. Well, and it'll land in front of you.
My number one type of sighting, almost all my sightings fall in three categories as far as people I interview. Number one is road crossing. Probably number two is guys that are hunting or camping, hiking, having some sort of outdoor activity. And the third most common one is basically someone who's like standing at the kitchen sink washing dishes, looks out the window at the cow pasture to check on their cows or whatever they've got out behind the house, and sees something looking back at them out in the edge of the woods. Or they're out in the garden working and look up and see something that's basically curious hanging out in the edge of the woods watching them.
I got one more question from the chat, and then we're going to run out of time. And that's how do you guys weed through the reports that you get to pick the ones to go investigate?
Oh man, honestly, hours of reading and rereading and calling and talking to people. I mean, if you read it and it just is too outlandish to even remotely be true, then a lot of times you put it on the back burner and you may get back to it later. But, you read over it and then you're like, I'm going to call this person and talk to them. And you call them and you talk to them and they really have a good story and they sound like an honest person and you get their background. And I mean, they're not somebody that is just prone to a bad imagination. And so, you just kind of have to use common sense and just use your judgment.
Yeah, I kind of try to do a sniff test on the surface first and then just see if it feels right. And I look for commonality. Most of the stories that I get from people have certain elements that are not out there in the popular imagination, like the height situation, things like that. Because if somebody calls me up and says, I saw a 14-foot tall Bigfoot, carrying my cow away, or something like that, it doesn't sound as plausible as somebody who sees a 6-foot tall thing running on 4 legs that then stands up and looks back at him, So I just kind of look for commonality with other sightings, and I look at the overall credibility of the person, what sort of background they come from. I've talked to some politicians. I've talked to some law enforcement people who are all witnesses. There's a remarkable variety of people out there. Most of the people I've talked to come from very legitimate, very sane sort of backgrounds. They're not the sort of people that seem like they're going to be prone to making stories up,
Right, yeah. So it looks like we lost Jeff again there at the end.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, one of my pet projects right now with our group, if you don't mind me putting in a little bit of a plug for it.
No, go right ahead. Please do.
We're premiering a website. It's going to be at easttexasunusual.com. We have just a almost bare template up there currently with our investigator names and a link to our Facebook group. We have a closed Facebook group. The reason it's closed is to encourage people to tell their stories in a little bit more private environment. And we have a lot of really good stories in there, Bigfoot, paranormal, just about anything like that you'd be interested in. I currently only have a link to the Facebook group on easttexasunusual.com, but over the course of the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to be bringing online report forms where people can submit stories to us, or they can read stories that other people have submitted, that sort of thing. We're kind of bringing in on phases because we all work for a living, so it's sometimes difficult to find the time. But easttexasunusual.com.
TexasUnusual.com.
East Texas Unusual.
I put your EastTexasUnusual.com.
Yes, EastTexasUnusual.com. We stuck the East in it because we're focusing mainly on the Piney Woods area of Texas, which, of course, is where the vast majority of all of the Bigfoot-related sightings are. And, of course, there's no shortage of paranormal stories in that area either. So,
right. Well, I put your Facebook group at the top of the page here, so hopefully you'll get some good hits from that.
Yeah, and like I say, we're adding new investigators. We're starting to expand our area a little bit. Right now we focus principally on southeast Texas, but we may be having some investigators come online in more of the central portion of East Texas. But we also refer people. So I have referred several people to other groups. I referred someone recently to the GCBRO because that person was a good match for the GCBRO. So we try to be, we don't keep any secrets. We don't keep anybody to ourselves. If we feel like some other investigator like Jeff or Chester or somebody like that or the GCBRO would have an interest in a person, we pass them right along.
Right. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, because we don't have any delusions that we're going to be the one that, proves something, but we would love to just be the one that provides something for the person who does,
Sure. Well, you never know. You might be.
Yeah, you never know. We're probably just about as likely as anyone else, but it's a fringe thing. There's very little hard proof available, and so as a result, it'll probably always be controversial.
Well, I had a good night talking to you guys. I'm sure it was a good interview, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate the opportunity to get on and talk a little bit about what we all do, and I'm sure Jeff feels the same way.
And like I said last time we talked, I hope this isn't the last time we talk.
Sure. We're always available. Got some interesting witnesses for you if you ever want to interview any of them. And
absolutely. I'm going to give Bubba a call here soon.
Oh, absolutely. Give him a call. We got some investigators that have had some unusual things themselves. So just anytime you get ready.
Excellent. I sure do appreciate it. All right, James. Have a good night. I will talk to you soon.
You too. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, folks. That's our show for tonight. As always, you can find us at talkbigfoot.com, and we are on Facebook. We're on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. We're on YouTube. You can Google us and just about find us anywhere. Thanks for listening. Have a good night.